Anthem has officially been out a week, kinda technically 2 with all of the early access stuff, but it has been a pretty turbulent time. Metacritic is a bit of a mess, with the majority of journalists and reviewers giving it mixed reception, and the user score either being given a game a 1 out of 10 or a 0 out of 10, with others trying to give a high score in order to balance out the numbers. But I guess the most important information that we want to know, and also EA will want to know, is how well the game sold. It really didn't get off to a good start with some information that came out of Britain, but apparently the digital sales are really good. So we're going to go over everything that we know so far. There's been more updates of a patch that went out yesterday, and also I did want to talk about my impressions of the loot changes now that I've pretty much been playing all day. My name is Ryan Central, you can subscribe for more Anthem content if you're interested, but let's start talking about the bad sales that have happened to Anthem so far, and that started here in the UK. According to the UK box charts for game releases, Anthem managed to get the top spot of games sold. That's very good. You can see the list on screen: Anthem, Far Cry New Dawn, which is still a pretty good game. Not really here to talk about that, but you can generally see how games sold in total. Percentages based on sales: about 54% were PlayStation 4, 40% came from Xbox, with the remainder on PC. The issue that a lot of people have been highlighting really is how much that amount is in total, with the number coming in that Anthem sold around 10% of what Destiny sold in its first week, and even Mass Effect Andromeda performing a lot better than Anthem in terms of physical launches. And that's really the important thing to highlight. GameIndustry.biz article that brought this up in the first place, I believe, does also say that because it is an online focused game, it's likely Anthem performed well as a download release. This chart does not currently factor in digital sales, making any meaningful analysis impossible. It hasn't stopped people saying this game is done poorly in comparison, but it might mean that Anthem, in the UK at least, is performing quite poorly on console. Whilst I would definitely agree that the sales numbers here in comparison to Destiny are poor, I do feel that to an extent you can't really compare them. Destiny 1 came out purely on the PlayStation, and around the time where digital sales using the PlayStation Store were useful, but not as popular as they were now, I believe. The difference between now and then, I'd say that digital is definitely a lot more popular, especially on the high street in the UK, right? Because for the most part, it's just a lot cheaper to get it online. But nevertheless, people looked at this and said, yep, Anthem is definitely underperforming. However, it seems that Anthem is doing a lot better in other countries, Japan being one of them. In a Push Square article, they say that Anthem managed to move 78,000 copies in Japan at launch, but it didn't exactly have much competition. But it's certainly one of those areas where I can understand Japanese players being interested in the idea and concept of Anthem, and this was on launch day, so this could certainly improve over the next coming weeks. But considering that EA wants 6 million copies of Anthem to be sold at the end of its fiscal year, that's quite a steep climb for them to be able to get that. In fact, I'd say that most people are assuming that it's going to do a lot worse than that in total. So in the UK, it's doing quite poorly. In Japan, it's doing better than expected, I'd say. But what about digital? Because that's the main area that we're looking at here. And we don't have an awful lot of information to look at, certainly not numbers just yet, but that might be possible in the future. But from a response that came out of Mike Gamble, who is one of the lead producers on this game, he wanted to sort of shed some light on how it's doing. Start off with Mike Gamble tweeting about lots of Japanese folks playing Anthem, really happy to see that. And he was asked, will we be able to see the numbers for digital downloads? He says, maybe. I don't control that stuff though. Digital is very popular though. How popular is still the question that needs to be answered, but it's quite interesting that the lead producers turned around and said, hey, the sales actually are quite good. In fact, I think the majority of people from BioWare have been saying that sales have been as expected. A lot of people have been asking, will we find out the digital download numbers? And the answer should be yes. I mean, EA have to sort of show all of their recordings, how much money they've made from Anthem. So no doubt they'll go over digital sales, how much they sold in total, and then maybe details like monthly active users. But the whole talk of Anthem performing poorly, being a rushed out game that isn't ready to be launched, to be honest, has got a lot of people talking about BioWare's future and how they're concerned that EA will just shut them down like they did with BioWare Montreal after Andromeda. Considering that Andromeda, at least at this point, seems to have sold a lot better than Anthem, although I'm not led to believe that that's really the case. But actually looking at the responses from the developers, even the main ones, they don't have a worry in the world. On a thread on the subreddit, they were saying about BioWare not giving up on Anthem. BioWare Ben, who isn't Ben Irving, he's another developer, posted this picture, and then when asked, aren't you guys worried EA is going to pull a plug? He said not in the slightest. But Mike Gamble, who is one of the lead producers on this game, also had a lot to say on that topic. Monsoon tweeted him saying, "I really hope EA doesn't shut down your studio." Mike Gamble said that a lot of folks are playing Anthem and we've announced our live service plans. Don't worry about that, we are getting great support. And then more recently, Valentin said that he's worried EA might shut down stuff because of sales expectations. Robert agreed, and Mike Gamble said, "Don't sweat this guy seriously." So it's either that EA have sort of said that they are going to help support the game through this period. Of course, they know that Anthem has come out in a less than stellar state. They're kind of to blame for that because it's EA, they like to rush games out the door. But also the sales might be a lot better than they were intending. It could also be, BioWare saving face, and it could come crashing down around them. But it's really hard to say at this point. It seems that they're quite confident that Anthem will live on, and EA will be happy with the response that the game's getting. Who knows really? I am curious to know what you guys think in the comments below, whether you feel that Anthem sold better or worse than expected. We of course have the big loot update which we spoke about yesterday, but even that has changed slightly to what was actually patched. But there was also another patch yesterday, a hotfix that fixed some major issues in the game that I really wanted to highlight. This morning we will be deploying a patch with the following changes. The tethering timer for missions has been increased, players should now have more time to catch up to their squad before seeing the countdown timer. The Swarm Tyrant encounter in the Tyrant Mine Stronghold can no longer be reset by the entire squad exiting to the main menu and then rejoining the session in progress. Players are no longer able to reopen chests that have already been looted in strongholds. The first change is really nice. I feel like from playing, I haven't really seen a countdown timer to the tethering system, so it's a lot more lenient in general. So it's still there, it still has an effect, but gives you a little bit longer before the countdown timer shows up, because it would break immersion a lot of the time and just be really irritating when it showed up. People were exploiting the Swarm Tyrant encounter by killing the boss, going out to the main menu and then coming back in, because that would start the boss fight again and you could just keep picking up loot. And the final change I haven't really experienced myself, but of course there were the changes to inscriptions and how loot drops. Here's the update that you were waiting on. The following changes are now live. Items will no longer have inscriptions on them that are not appropriate for that specific item. This only applies to the items obtained after the patch. Items obtained prior to the hotfix will still have the same inscriptions they had before. And Masterwork crafting costs have been reduced from 25 to 15 Masterwork embers. The amount of plants, metals and parts required for crafting a Masterwork item have also been reduced. So it's a lot cheaper to craft Masterwork items. But in a post coming from Darokas, the community manager, he says that they haven't removed the green or white loot dropping yet for level 30s as it needs more testing. As going off the previous patch notes that were mentioned, BioWare planned to remove all uncommon white and common green items from a level 30 drop table. And now all of these changes are in game. So now that these changes are actually in game and I've been playing the majority of the day with them, I kind of wanted to give my impressions really quickly. I still think it's a long way to go. I think these changes are really good. It's nice to not have crap inscriptions on gear where it has no influence on it at all. I feel like it's one of those patches that did the bare minimum here. They fixed issues in the game that really should have been in for launch, but it seems that BioWare really don't want to touch the drop rate. But I don't really want to necessarily talk about that too much, because greens and whites are still in the game for level 30. It might be the case of removing whites and greens from the loot table might increase the amount of Masterworks or legendaries that drop just because of that. So I don't necessarily want to give my impression on loot drop rates just yet, but there was a period where I got like half a dozen Masterworks in an hour of playing, but I did do strongholds, I did do my legendary contracts, so that is guaranteed free already. The game needs primary and secondary inscriptions desperately. There needs to be a main focus on stats such as damage, cooldown reduction, elemental damage, stuff that makes your weapons better, in comparison to secondary stats which would be stuff like harvest bonus, ammo reserves, luck. You can't really compare those two stats. One affects your playstyle, the rest is more passive stuff. So they need to be separated and put into their own micro loot tables for people to roll from. Talking to another friend, he highlighted that the delta of certain stats is pretty big too. You could have a weapon that has the inscription to increase that weapon damage by 1%, but it could also scale all the way up to 200% as an example. Like I have this shotgun that has a 250% damage increase, which is great, but there are a few weapons that I have that have a similar inscription, but at 1%. 1 versus 200 is too big of a gap. These need trimming down, and also being able to know what the highest percentile stat is and how your gear compares to that. There's no context there. Diablo had this where they showed that, oh hey, if you have a damage inscription, the lowest stat that you could get is plus 15 damage, whereas the highest could be plus 30. So if you get an inscription that says plus 28% damage, you can see that it's a really good stat in comparison. These changes are really good. It's even better that BioWare have been on the ball with this, but it would not surprise me in the slightest that within half a week people are still complaining about the loot and how unfair the system is. But this is a step in the right direction, but I do feel that more needs to be done here, but that's typically Anthem at this point. Do let me know what you think of the loot system now that you've played it a little bit in the comments below. This is everything that I wanted to go over today. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a good weekend. Take care, and I'll see you then.